is Nick Jordan from Content Distribution. Hey, Nick.
Hey, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on board. I've been a big fan. Like I say, I've been doing my homework and just reading every single guide that you guys have there on your free resources page. So I was super excited to see, a lot of the content that you produced and those results. So we've all heard of the Fat Graph Facebook group and just astounding, organic, increases. So we'll talk about that, and yeah, we'll see where the conversation goes a little bit.
Yeah, I think the results are impressive, but what I like talking about the most is that all of the success factors that drive those results are within your control. You don't necessarily need to pray to the Google guides to get outcomes like that.
Yeah, so the main article that I was looking at today was essentially how Google works, right? And that was the cover for today's YouTube Live. And I was super interested in, just going through there because it has a lot of like myth busters. It starts off with like Brian Dean and the guys, right? And it's like 200 plus ranking factors, and it's like, okay, site speed, is probably a thing, it's probably a factor, but what is 80/20 rule, right? What's going to give you that giant leap forward and get you actually the results, aka sales through the door. And even me, I've done a lot of shifting towards their product led SEO and or just increasing that quality, right? So what's a little bit of your process? What can you recommend for our viewers? Where is the shift in mindset?
Yeah, let's just step back for a second and kind of talk
Cool.
about how Brian Dean, clearly a great SEO and much more successful than me. But with that said, he's the reason that it took me so long to learn SEO. I tried to get into SEO multiple times over the last 10 years, and I'd always end up reading articles like Brian Dean's 200 ranking factors. And SEO just seems so inaccessible because I, as a new entrant to the field, have to juggle all these variables in my head. But when I execute them, I don't see the results for 3 to 6 months. And so ultimately, I think articles like that do a disservice because the majority of the audience that's reading it isn't experienced SEOs like us. It's SEOs who are trying to learn SEO and get into it and don't have any kind of framework behind them. And so, SEO didn't really click for me until I stopped worrying about all those 200 ranking factors and really focused on a handful of things, with content quality being the most important.
Right. So I was reading through things, and one of the main things I think that you guys had put in that guide was, relevance is key for SEO. You kind of want your, H1 title, URL, what would call like the SEO hotspots, right? But really,
Yeah.
Google is still at the end of the day, blind 3-year old or whatever you want to call it. It's not quite AI yet. It's not a human being, but it's still going to go through and assess quality in some measure, right? So what can we actually do to, check those boxes off? And I think you had a section in there. It was like, what's Google going to pick? The, 900 word article or the 3,000 word article with, listicles, your bullets, H1s, video enhancements, all those extra things that gives you like, hey, this article is 10x better than any other article on the internet. And my friend Nathan Gotch, he said, forget SEO for a second. Is just ask yourself that one question: is it 10x better than any other document on the internet that's on the same topic?
Yeah,
and that's a good measure.
Yeah, so I think the analogy I use is that, Google indexes your site and they can't read what you wrote and they don't know how good it is, but what they can look is attributes of good quality content. And so if I showed you 2 pieces of text and they were both in an alien language, or Chinese or Hindu or any language that you don't speak, how would you identify which one is better quality? Well, the one on the left-hand side, it's 500 words and it's one giant paragraph and there's maybe 1 comma and 1 period in the whole thing. Or this other article with 3,000 words, it has internal links to find out, in higher depth of detail. It has external links to authoritative resources. It has embedded images. There's bullets and tables and lists and a table of contents. Without even being able to read the content, you could probably just guess which one is better.
Right. And I even seen there in that particular page that you had 3 or 4 examples and literally like, SEO tools, Ahrefs showing the, DR, PR of the page. And you guys were beating a lot of the heavy hitters, with the
Yeah.
higher authority, just because the content was seen as higher quality or maybe more topical relevant or, topical authority.
Combination of both. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I was kind of
So
impressed with that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so for the audience that isn't familiar with me, we have over 200,000 page one keywords without building any backlinks. And kind of the way that I introduce kind of the concept of content quality is I talk about what you see on other platforms. So if you look at LinkedIn, if you look at Facebook, if you look at Instagram, if you look at TikTok, if you look at YouTube, and I said, hey, those platforms use user engagement metrics to influence how much reach and visibility they give you. Everyone would say, I already knew that, Nick. Duh. But when I tell people that's how Google search works, the more time on site you have, the more pages visited, the more overall site engagement, the more return visitors, the more branded searches, the easier it is for you to rank, and the more visibility you'll get. People go, well, what happened to backlinks? And Google owns Google Analytics, they own Chrome, and they own Android. And so they have analytics across the entire device stack.
Damn it.
And it just seems crazy to me that the world's most innovative big data company would look at their peers and say, user engagement metrics, not for me.
Right. Yeah, and when I was reading that, I mean, those are the ones where my hair literally stands up on end, right? And I'm like, they literally have to, right? In order to combat, link spam and, the backlink game, more or less, they have to devalue that and go to, things that are harder to quote unquote game, because usually that's some days what SEOs are up to, right? They're either buying links or doing things that, get the rankings, right?
Yeah.
It's their algorithm, but we'll find exploits to kind of get through and get there quicker. Having said that, even GMB rankings, local rankings, they're more so, especially 2021, 2022, engagement, metrics, exactly what you say, behavioral. Even the pogo sticking comment really hit home. It's like, sure, you can probably slingshot to number one with some good tactics, but does the user really like that page at number one? Does the user back off the page once it gets there? And then you see that pogo sticking, and then you really land, where your content should be, based on metrics, user behavior.
Yeah, it's I think people are finally waking up. I see, every week I see more and more posts on my news feed saying, hey, I ranked without backlinks, and here are these really powerful sites that I'm above. And so I think people are catching on, but I still think there's a lot of advocacy to catch everybody up into how search is working today, at least from our experience.
Yeah, so let's maybe shift now. So we know that, number one, that's what Google's looking for. That's sort of what Google, how it works, what it wants, quality, right? In a nutshell, it's quality content that's relevant to the search. Search intent is a thing. We don't have to touch on that too much. But now what's the process? So for me, I know a huge leap forward when I was just like shooting from the hip. I would just be like, here's a keyword, here's an article, here's a keyword, here's an article. It's a wild, wild west. And I'm like, okay, let's stop that. And then enter, sort of cluster AI. Let's map out content for an entire year. Let's stay away from keyword cannibalization. Let's take in, user data, a good user client feedback where it's like, hey, I'm really interested in a guide about this, or I really need this, problem solved for this product. Great. Let's create content around that and plan it across like a 12-month schedule. Maybe we'll start with publishing velocity or how that gets mapped out with your team.
Yeah, let's talk about publishing velocity. So what we see is that the more content we publish around a particular topic or subtopic, the better all of that content will do. And whenever I kind of have an SEO explanation, I really try and focus it in business logic rather than technical reasons. So recently, John Mueller, he tweeted or something, or he said in a live that it's hard to call a 30-page website authoritative. In 2022, the barrier to creating a 30-page website is almost zero. Anyone who makes a website can put 30 pages on it. And you
Right.
could probably even extend that to 50 pages, maybe even 100 pages. Once you start talking about hundreds of pages, that's when most people, they can't surpass that. But 30 to 50 pages, anyone can do that. And so if Google let any 30-page website rank for the keywords that they're targeting, two things would happen. The first is that Google would be sending its traffic to scammy websites that just popped up yesterday.
Right.
And the users would get scammed and they'd lose money and it'd be a poor experience. And Google would ultimately be doing a disservice to their audience. The second thing is that you publish a 30-page website, you get the keywords that you're looking for. Well, tomorrow someone else, 100 other people publish a 30-page website about those same keywords, and now you just got bumped off. And so the cost to creating 100, 200, 500 pages of content begins to add up fairly quickly. And in order to be able to support that level of investment into content, because content's not cheap, there has to be some sort of business model that customers appreciate and are willing to give you money for in order to support that content investment. And so I think that's why Google kind of, I think topical relevance and content velocity work so well, is because you're signaling to Google, I'm making this big investment because I have a business model customers really enjoy.
Yeah, and what's your main KPI there? So you're speaking in business models, which I like because I'm more, I would say, director of marketing than I am a SEO sort of second, right? So I'm
Yeah.
a really big believer in driving, AKA sales. And what are we using to do that? Organic traffic value, direct conversions, lifetime
Mm-hmm.
average value of a customer, all of those things you can use to kind of quantify the value back to the customer and say, hey, organic traffic visits brought in, and I saw the reviews right on content distribution, 100 CC credit card signups direct from organic in the first, 3 months or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was Uplead, but it's amazing to see that, because then you see, oh, okay, direct correlation to value, and it's a perfect one-to-one match, and you have it in the report and the KPIs.
Yeah, I'd love to share my KPIs with you, because it allows me to know if a project is off track within 60 days. And I feel like there's so many people that end up getting scammed by SEOs that if more people knew this framework, I think SEOs would actually close more deals, because clients know they don't need to wait 9 months. They only need to wait 60 days to figure out if it's working. So I invented this kind of KPI framework when I started my agency, because I didn't want to build a bad agency. If I couldn't make every single project successful, I didn't want to do an agency, because it just sounded like a nightmare. Building an agency is hard enough when all your projects go well. Being able to build a successful agency when a significant percentage of your projects don't do well is just, it's too hard. I'm not a masochist.
Yeah.
And so I developed this framework because I was like, Nick, I'm going to give myself a year and I need to be able to iterate if it's not working. And after that year, if it's not consistent, then I'm out. Now I use this framework to hold my team accountable. So I don't need to go into the project, the nitty gritty. I can just look at a couple of KPIs and I can know if my team's on the right track. And then I give my clients this framework too. And so that now they can hold everybody accountable on the project's team. And then it's basically a shifting set of KPIs depending on the stage of the campaign. And so it starts off with, did we do the work we said we're going to do? Which for us, it's publish a lot of high quality content. The second is impressions increasing? Now, once you publish and keywords get indexed, the next thing that happens is impressions in Google Search Console should go up. And if impressions don't come, clicks aren't going to come. Impressions is a leading indicator of clicks. And so if impressions are flat for 60 days, well, I know that the campaign is off track. The next metric we track is, well, great, we're getting impressions, they're going up week over week, but are the clicks coming? And after the clicks start coming consistently, are the clicks coming, week over week and month over month? Are they growing? And then once that's yes, we finally get to signups and some sort of conversion metric. The first thing that we're proving is, hey, we can consistently grow traffic. The second thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that that traffic is, turning into dollars.
Yeah, and I know that there is, and I've used this to close deals as well, the ROI SEO calculator on content distribution.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
right.
great.
And that's
That's
quantifying
wonderful.
value, right? Like that's sales 101. What's in it for me? Well, look at, this is what you'd be paying maybe in PPC spend. This is what we
Yeah.
can do for you in the first. And you should really have that timeline like you guys have, a good framework. If they're not at this, particular milestone at this point in time, let's course correct, right? Let's readjust and hit the target. Would you say that maybe Google Search Console is your main kind of navigation system for? Do you
In
have?
the beginning, for sure, 100% in the beginning, just because Google Analytics doesn't have much useful data. It doesn't tell us, hey, if you don't have any clicks, Google Analytics doesn't help. But
Right.
Google Search Console will tell you if you're on the right track before you start getting the clicks. And then it'll, of course, attribute the clicks to specific keywords and et cetera, et cetera. But I'd say after month 6 or something, I'm all Google Analytics all day.
Yeah, and I've even seen in the page level on Google Search Console, you can start to see sort of like sprout keywords or seed keywords where it's like these keywords are getting impressions, and sometimes those keywords aren't even really on the page. Or you could break
Yeah.
out a topic, create a new, paragraph around that, and then get those
Yeah.
keywords kind of geared up to double down, which is
Yeah.
great too as well. So we talked about process. We talked about why Google ranks content the way that it does. What about topical, relevance and authority? Do you guys worry about that? Do you lay out like, a pillar and post type model where it's one main, article? Let's say it's a service, right? Let's talk SaaS. So maybe it's credit card fraud, and then you do 8 or 9 posts towards a service page. Or do you think more topically? Do you do topic maps? What's the process there?
Yeah. So what a lot of businesses get wrong is they think that there's like a couple keywords that they want to rank for, or maybe like a couple handfuls, and really that's almost always incorrect. Now, when it comes to local, I have no idea. You're the resident expert when it comes to local. I'm sure there's a lot fewer, but when it comes to SaaS businesses and e-commerce, there generally isn't a handful of keywords. There's hundreds or thousands.
Right.
And that's just at the bottom of the funnel. If you want to talk about the mid and top of the funnel, you're talking hundreds of thousands of keywords, maybe millions. And in order to rank for all of the ways that people who want to give you money are searching, you don't just need a couple pages, you need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And so that credit card fraud example, there's probably within just that like credit card fraud SaaS service, there's probably 5 to 10 landing pages that Google considers slightly different intents and will
Okay.
show different SERPs for those keywords. And so you might have 5 or 10 just targeting different types of credit card fraud. And then you'll have all this mid funnel content related to like error codes in credit card fraud and like how to dispute credit card fraud and all these other things. And the more content that you publish behind those bottom of the funnel landing pages and the more internal links you send to those bottom of the funnel landing pages, like the better all of the content will rank. And oftentimes when we don't get the desired result on our first pass, all we have to do is drive, a couple dozen internal links to the page that we want to rank higher.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I realize that too. Like you're really big, and I remember seeing a Facebook post that literally you had said, you know, internal links do what most SEOs think that backlinks do, and I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And the algorithm's always changing, right? So it really is kind of
Yeah.
like, where's your mindset? Is it back in 1995, or is it 2023 and beyond kind of deal, right? So
Yeah.
internal link audits is definitely a thing for us. Topical relevance is a thing. A quick note, I really like to do this, and I was going to ask if you do any competitor analysis. What I like to do is a site operator, and take, top 3, ranking guys that we're trying to, compete with, or, beat out in rankings, and site and plus topic. And then it will give me a list of how many pages. Taking the credit card fraud example, I'd see, oh, they have 328 different articles all around that, general topic. And then I'll go back to the customer and be like, okay, you're going to need 350, 400 pages to get to the same level of, authority, topical
Top authority,
authority.
yeah.
Yeah. And you haven't even measured internal links yet. You haven't even measured domain authority yet. You haven't measured backlinks. You're just talking content, content to content, apples to apples. And that's a big deal. And it's a big eye opener, but at least you're not going to shoot yourself in the foot. Like you say, go in there, guns a blazing and say, yeah, we'll have you there in 2 months or whatever. And you had no idea, what you're up against. So is competitor analysis part of that? Hey, how do we win
Yeah.
on
So for us, competitor analysis, it's during the project kickoff. We're doing it for kind of seed keyword ideation, so we can go and kind of map the landscape behind any particular subtopic or silo. The second thing we're doing is we're looking at site structure. We have some general best practices around site structure, like trying to reduce the number of clicks to any given page to as few as possible from the homepage. But in every niche, you'll see, you'll see differences in the way that site structure is executed against. And so we just want to understand how the top players in a particular niche do their footer, they do their categories, they do their header, they do their kind of programmatic linking. And then the number of pages also kind of sets the tone for, what kind of campaign this is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, a quick note on site structure. I came across this is local, but anyways, they had folders set up, and I always wonder about, keyword cannibalization there, where basically they had like main service, stick plumbing. So they had like 10 different services, but within a folder, and they all had plumbing. I really think that 2022, you're triggering, too much optimization. You might be keyword cannibalizing that entire silo. We all know that if things are shifted to the left, Google will deem that more important. And then above and on that, what does that silo really serve anymore, right? So we actually took a look at it in another mastermind. In e-commerce, it really makes sense where you have like something like hammer drills, or and like 500 other, Makita, DeWalt, the whole gambit. So there is a huge shift, I find, between larger sites and sort of local, and what makes sense in site architecture, and how to create, a good layout that Google would not only understand, but also rank, accordingly, hopefully at the top of the list, right? So just kind of some thoughts there.
We use category and subcategories really heavily, but we click the little box in WordPress that says don't include it in the URL. And so it's always domain.com/
Gotcha.
page title. And then we do the kind of the hierarchy through the breadcrumbs and other ways to discover content. But when you kind of bucket content into categories, especially on like a national or international site, what if you're like a year later, your content's expand, you're like, actually, this belongs in a different category. Well, to move it, you have to break all the URLs and redirect them, which is also, you never want to change the URL if you don't have to. So the naked URLs just allow you more flexibility. So I'm with you on that.
Easy to move around. Yeah, even on the blog topics, we've seen people like having the worst iteration where they're like, oh, I want the, category, and I want the date in there, and then I want, I'm like, no, don't put tag, category, date, and then your URL, slug. It gets
WordPress should really just remove that from the default WordPress build. I don't know anyone who's like, yeah, I want the date in my URL. Like, there's no one that's like, yeah, give me that.
You'd be surprised. Oh God, it's pretty funny. Only in the local side of things, but yeah, some of the hilarious conversations that I have with clients some days is pretty funny. Yeah. I- The last comment was let the people put in the data. All good. So
Glenn's Glenn's he's a man of the people. What can I say?
he is. I love him. I talk to him often, so I'm always kind of nerding out more on the SEO side, but we're always interested in kind of the next thing. I was wondering too, like, so relevance. Let's talk about this really quick. When you
Yeah.
talked about nailing that down, you also talked about, relevant keywords and things of that nature. So, do you guys have a process there? Do you like? I enter SEOs, they argued, is LSI a thing for maybe the last half decade, right? Like, and now we're here, and I'm like, okay, related keywords. Obviously, they have them at the bottom of the list of Google. Definitely, there's a thing with, if you want to get technical or nerdy, node edges and what is really semantically related. If you like that flavor of terminology better, what do you guys use there? Do you like certain tools? I know there's some really advanced stuff. I personally like InLinks. I'm a good friend with Dixon. He's a great guy, smart SEO. And he had the wherewithal to put in like topical relevance in Majestic way back, before anybody even mentioned the word relevance
Wow.
thing, right?
Cool.
And now he's into the on-page side, which is the shift anyways, right? So doing things
Yeah.
like maps, internal links, and schema. That's really that whole tool, which is funny because coming full circle, you're like, well, that's where it's at, right? Like topical relevance, internal linking, and if you got killer content, then you win. So again,
The
yeah, what are you
yeah.
using to
So
find those keywords?
there's still a ton of work to be done, but I've definitely noticed a shift over the last, year, and it's just accelerating on kind of the share of voice. To give a shout out to Steve
Right?
Pa.
Keywords.com. Yep.
Like the share of voice between on page and off page. People are clearly on page is increasing in terms of frequency, in terms of the discussion, which is really positive to see. Um, in terms of relevance, yeah, I think it's really important. What I discovered early on is that I ended up outranking Instagram and Shopify for some of
Oh,
their own branded keywords. And the Instagram
wow.
one's kind of funny. I was number one for Instagram support, ranking above Instagram themselves. And when you looked at our page versus Instagram's, well, Instagram had a bunch of gobbledygook in the URL. Their support page had like 8 words of content. There's no heading, very little there's very little relevance to Instagram support, despite it being the Instagram support page. Like you said, the SEO focus areas, the URL, the H1s, the
Hotspots. Yeah.
H2s,
Yep.
the hotspots. Yeah. And then when you looked at our article, the slug was Instagram support. The H1 said Instagram support. We had a couple of H2s that included the word Instagram or support. Our content was much longer. And just looking at it from the reader's eyes, people go to Instagram, they find out that they can't submit a support request. Instagram doesn't want to talk to you. And then they look at our article and they're like, there's hope. If I read every word on this page, I might figure out how to get a hold of Instagram. Now they couldn't, but our user engagement metrics were clearly better than Instagram's, just because we gave users hope that they could eventually contact them. So anyways, this was kind of an introductory project. It was my first SEO project. I grew the blog to my employer's blog to 100,000 organics a month with traffic that didn't do anything, but I used those concepts later on, and now they make us money.
Yeah.
With Cluster AI, it's very easy to do keyword optimizations. Stepping back, if you look at our writers, editors, and PMs, none of them know SEO. All of them are language nerds who obsess over content quality, and then during the editing phase, they have to do a couple things that to keep Nick happy. Is the way that they explain it to each other. Just don't ask questions. Just keep Nick happy. And essentially, once you get the Cluster AI deliverable, which you get basically a list of every page of content you'll create,
Right.
along with the main keyword and all the variations that can rank with the main keyword. And now you can have non-SEOs doing SEO. And basically, the main keyword is always the URL. the main keyword always goes in the H1, the meta title and the meta description. And then the keyword variations that Cluster AI finds for you always goes in the H2 and in the content. And so, once the writer uses the main keyword like 87 times, just go through the keyword variations and swap out the very similar keywords with the same intent but are slightly different. And then if there's any keyword variations that have different enough intent, you can make them H2s. So an example that I generally show people is my kind of opportunity analysis around wireless earbuds. So just imagine an Excel spreadsheet. It has 1,000 rows. Each row is a page. And in the first spot is the keyword wireless earbuds. Well, one of the keyword variations is like earbuds wireless. That's similar enough where you can just swap out the main keyword that the writer used 87 times with the slightly different variation. But some of the variations that can rank with the main keyword wireless earbuds are like best Bluetooth Bluetooth earbuds with the best battery life.
Okay.
Now that's different enough from the main keyword that I would make that its own H2, because the main keyword's about best wireless earbuds, and I'll do my rankings. But maybe I'll do a secondary ranking of just the wireless earbuds, and the only criteria I'm using is not sound quality or build quality or price. It's just whichever lasts the longest.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Lasting life. Gotcha.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of a complicated explanation to follow without having the keyword research data to look at it.
I thought you were going to go after Bluetooth as a ranking factor, but you went after the life of the battery. Gotcha.
Generally, it's always accompanied by a screen share, but I won't turn this into a demo. So if you want to learn more, contentdistribution.com. We have basically the playbook that our PM, who didn't know SEO until she was promoted from editor to PM, used to do keyword research for 10,000 pages. Sorry?
The content ops document, is that the one you're speaking of?
There's a couple different resources on contentdistribution.com, free guides, but basically we have a free guide that we use internally, and the person internally who uses it has done keyword research for more than 10,000 pages in the last 12 months, and she didn't know SEO before joining our organization. So
Bullion
it works.
Shared the CBD template example, which is a good one. And
cool.
There's a few in the Facebook group as well. So before you slap my hand through a video, keyword density, do you ever care about it? There we go. SEO tactics versus SEO copywriting.
Yeah, exactly. So what
do you
I
ever
tell
look
my
at it or
what
no?
I tell
Yeah.
No, what I tell my writers is, listen, your job is to create the best, highest quality, the word I use is create the most valuable page of content Google could show for the keywords that we want to rank for. I don't use quality, I use valuable. Like, it creates the most value for the reader. And so our content team's job is to create the most valuable content, and then it's the editor's job to sprinkle in the keyword variations. And we don't measure any sort of density. There's no percentages that we look at or anything like that.
So long factors.
Our editors might be like, you've used the same keyword 1,000 times. This is not how our content works. The only time we talk about keyword density is if someone tries to do it. And then we say, don't do that.
Don't do that, please. Yeah, I remember our call from Workello. So a quick note there, you've created a whole software where basically you can vet writers very quickly, increase hiring funnel process. Got that down to a science, obviously, from the good processes that you had at content distribution. And the main thing that I took away from that call, you said, Chris, our main metric for our writers, they care. They actually care a lot about writing. They love writing, like it's, and you said female, usually English majors that care. And I was like, it's a big eye opener because, I just put a meme. I know you liked it, but it was like the guy from Gru where he's like rubbing the keyboard against his butt. He's like AI content writers in 2022. I'm just like, come on, guys. I use AI every now and again if I got to fill in a blank or if I'm doing FAQs, but I'm not using it like to create entire articles to spam Google. Me personally, I think there's better ways of going about it. But anyways, Workello.
So Yeah, so we built Cluster AI. It's used by 3,700 users. It gives you a year-long content calendar. For some people, it's 5 years long. And
Wow.
then the next question everybody would ask us is like, Nick, I can't create 500 pages of content because I just can't find any writers. And so we had spent the last 3 years more than 1,000 hours trying to figure out how to build a hiring funnel for our content agency because our growth was only limited by how many good writers that we could find. Going back to what you said about writers who care, every word in content writing is a liability. So
Right.
how do you publish hundreds of thousands of liabilities a month? Well, you need people who care because the easiest thing to do is let shit slide. And people like you and me who aren't content like language people, like I think we let shit like I let shit slide. Like when I was editor, when I was CEO, editor, sales guy of my agency, like I was publishing content I wasn't reading, and it's because I don't care. And my business didn't take off until I found someone who actually cared. And kind of the archetype for our organization is, Eastern European, and for whatever reason, it's mostly women, and most of them started learning English like through Hollywood and video games when they were 5, and then they went to college for language arts, and then they got their master's degree, and then they taught English, and then they just spend their time talking about how they're gonna get their PhD in language arts.
Yeah, like almost a
And these people,
linguistic major, right? Like they're top level on that, you know,
they truly care about language as like art,
a
and that's
brush.
what you need to run a tight ship where every word is a liability.
I see.
And so the problem with hiring writers is that in 2022, writing is the lowest barrier work from home job on the internet. And anyone who has a crappy job is like, I want to work from home. I'm qualified to be a writer because I speak English. Well, according to the Department of Education, 54% of Americans have a middle school reading level or above, below. And so, not even in America do they speak good English. And this is the point where my editors would chime in and say, like, that was incorrect English, Nick. Um, and so, so not most of your candidates are unqualified. When you're hiring writers, it doesn't matter how much you pay or where you're recruiting from. 95% are not going to be good fits. And so, how do you very quickly filter through the 95% to find the remaining 5% who are actually good writers? Well, it turns out you have to test them. And I didn't know that until I spent thousands of dollars on content that I couldn't use without a total rewrite. And so I basically launched Workello to the community, just like I launched Cluster AI to the community based off of the SaaS we built internally. And since then, customers have used Workello to filter through more than 11,000 candidates to identify and hire the best.
Yeah, and I know a few of my friends have used Workello to extremely streamline that process. I think it was Adam that had the last Facebook post, and he just said, incredible
Yeah,
result, which
yeah.
is great, right? So I'll be sure to include those links in the description. I'll go back and edit. I know I got content distribution, but I'll make sure that Workello is in there as well. The caring thing, really hit home for me. The quality of content, right, and who you have vetting that content is a huge deal. What would you say is kind of like internal versus external? So I get this a lot where currently right now I'm writing a ton of SEO briefs, right? We see it a lot in
Yeah,
SaaS, we see it a lot in manufacturing.
yeah.
We want our own, on point communications, on brand, tone of voice, all the things you usually talk around a CEO table of, the marketing team or board. So what percentile would you say really quickly between internal writers like really go in and re-edit and write their own stuff versus you handing them over content that's 100% done for you, so to speak?
Do you mean like, do I hire freelancers or do I hire full time? Can you clarify?
So I didn't know, like, I know you're hiring writers, but I didn't know if they're writing like full 100% done for you articles or they're handing
Yeah,
over like more briefs and other things where their content team kind of goes in and finishes off the job.
yeah.
Less.
Yeah, so for us, all of our the projects that we work on, the clients want us to create the full page of content.
100%
And
done
so
for you. Okay.
we yeah, we don't use the content brief. What we've developed is something called a content series template. And essentially it's a content brief for 100 plus pages. And so let's say that I'm writing an article on um, CBD strains. Well, each of those pages doesn't need an individual brief because all the articles are essentially like the same. It's just a different type of strain of CBD. And so what we do is we create this template for all the articles under that series. Maybe there's some dynamic H2s that the writer might need to add on their own, and we'll kind of give them instructions on how to identify those H2s and expand on top of the template that we give them.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't think I've ever caught that before, like a whole content series, quote unquote brief, but I'll have to relook at that CBD template. But sounds pretty cool. And then within there, you'd probably say how many pages you'd need under that series.
Yeah, so Cluster AI will tell us how many pages of content there are. We'll go in and we'll choose our opportunities, and then we'll
Okay.
create the brief that helps all of the writers that will ever write on that subtopic create great content without us having to do it individually per page.
What's a normal like publishing month after month for a SaaS client for you guys? 100 pages a month, 200, 300, depending on the
The the man, I so the average is like 20 to 40.
20 to 40.
So
Okay.
over the course of a year, they'll end out with 250 to 400 pages of content, which I think puts anyone publishing 20 to 40 pages a month kind of in the top 1% of their industry. It's very hard for most companies to do that, but we've scaled as high as 800 pages a month for a single project.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean the results are there. So I mean the one thing that stuck out as far as a metric, 65,000 page one, keywords across the
Yeah,
client gambit. That's pretty amazing. And every day, I check it out, and it's like, journey to 1.5 million, visitors a
yeah.
month. You wouldn't want that, right? Like you're talking, the absolute precipice of top level, like you say, thought leadership, right? That's how
and
you.
and we did it without backlinks, or we did it without building new backlinks. And I think really what SEOs want is they want a consistent, repeatable way to get results that doesn't rely on praying to the Google gods. And that's you know like, I'm not a developer, I'm not a backlinker. Some people might not even say I'm a smart guy. And so I had to figure out a way to approach Google where I didn't need to rely on all those things that all the other SEOs know how to do, and I couldn't figure out.
I love your
But
business
one
model.
thing I do have,
Yeah.
one thing I do have, is an intense amount of empathy for the reader. And going back to content quality, if you have a lot of empathy for who's going to be consuming your content, you can identify what they need to know and then what they need to know next. And that's how you make better content than your competition, is your audience better.
I like that word, empathy. Are you guys using any type of Survey Monkey, Hotjar to get that customer feedback loop? That was a big deal to us when we were, I was director of marketing, where it was like, what does the client want? What are they really after? Listen, we're here to listen to you. We care. That was number one. And we use surveys a lot. We tried to
Yeah.
go back and listen to sales calls, right? So if there was any gold nugget in there, we'd use that for our content if we could find it. Do you guys have any feedback loops and processes there for client?
No, it's mostly just gut instinct, which doesn't help a lot of SEOs. Oh, just have more empathy, dude. Uh, no process, just kind of like.
I'll say it 100 times. Like I love you guys. Even like even Boyan is still in chat, right? And he's giving me hearts in the
Yeah,
chat and everything else here.
yeah,
Let's throw it up there. But yeah, the guys, they care, right? So it's pretty cool just to see the guys out there that are reaching out. You can tell who's leveling up the game. You can tell who's
yeah,
supporting other people. It's a big deal, and I think, I don't know, people kind of miss the soft skill side of things, especially I see that in the IT developer world a little bit, where it's like,
Yeah.
just leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anyone. And that's fine. I get the analytical mind. It just, it's not how networking, and we're geared towards being social and empathy.
I think I think some of the resistance for the SEO industry to shift into this new content focused world is that it's a lot easier to manage backlinks than people. And scaling content velocity and increasing topical authority, if you want to do it, it means hiring a bunch of people to write and edit this content. Honestly, people are a lot harder than 301 redirects. So
Right.
empathy is a tough skill. Some people are developers and backlinkers, and some people have empathy.
Yeah, that whole side of things is really, because I was always taught like your network is your net worth, or even reading the book. And this comes from Steve again. You mentioned him. He said, read The Go Giver. I mean, those are the people that are going to be the most successful in life. They just give their ideas away freely. They help others elevate, and they're always there. You know what I mean? That dependable person, especially if there's that empathy component, is what creates the strongest relationships. Even me, we have an app for our kids, and it's like, if you're there for your kid when he's at his lowest moment, like when he's at his worst, that is what really ties and creates a binding relationship. Like, he's going to be your person, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Go to, right? So I mean, it is 100% all about that empathy and care. So
careful though, caring's a lot of work. Like, it's not for everyone. It keeps you up at night, wrenches your heart, butterflies.
I always say to my wife, I'm always like, man, you're always talking like emotions, and like, put a peanut butter jelly sandwich in my hard drive. I'm like, I don't know, emotion. So geared towards logic some days, but yeah, it's good to have both. So, well, my absolute pleasure, Nick. Maybe we can do it again
My
with
pleasure.
the whole team one day, or we also have a mastermind. We'd love to have you guys on. You can come into
so cool.
private group as well. We've had many people join us kind of during the live call. We've had some chats and fun times, but my absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on board.
Well, I know Boyan would love to join you sometime. When I told him, hey, I'm doing this live with Chris, he goes, but I talked to Chris more. How come I didn't get invited to the live? So I know he's gunning for you.
All right. Yeah, we'll have him on for sure. That way we can, super nerd out and go super geeky on the SEO side. We'll play both sides a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love it.
Nick. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. All the best to you. Have a safe journey back home. Enjoy Seattle when you get there.
One more thing. If you like what you heard and you want to learn more, check out workello.com, contentdistribution.com. We're on YouTube as Content Distribution. You can join our Facebook group, Fat Graph Content Ops. And I think that's Twitter, Nick from Seattle.
Perfect. I'll put the links in the description as well. We'll get you there.
Cool.
Take care. Glad to see you again. Always a pleasure. We'll talk soon.